Hi, Leigh.
Hi, I'm so excited to talk about this episode. I don't wish to live in the present day in 2024. This is so much more fun.
I have nothing to give to modern day. I only have energy to give to the past.
Also, Fi, very exciting. I think we've officially made it with Queer Gals Watch because we're on Reddit and somebody has started a Reddit thread based off of our best fashion quickfire. And like the number one, I had a little stalk over what people were saying. And the number one like fashion moment of the whole show that the most people brought up was CJ's gown, her blue Dior in this episode.
Oh my God. A blue Armani, I think.
Blue Armani. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Listener, I do apologize. I've been doing a Sex and the City rewatch recently also, and I got to the point where she loses her Carrie necklace in her vintage Dior, which is why I have Dior on the brain.
On the brain, yeah.
No, yes, it's CJ's blue Armani is
up there.
According to Reddit, the fashion moment of the whole show.
We know that I'm well established as an internet lurker, like famously never post, but always lurking. So I'm going to be heading to Reddit after this record for sure. Well, welcome back, listeners, to Queer Gals Watch the West Wing with the lovely Leigh and myself, Fi.
We are here. We are queer, and we are here with Season 2, Episode 9 of The West Wing, Galileo, which immediately put me in the 80s. I'm with the Indigo Girls. I'm vibing.
I love that for you. I immediately went Queen.
Of course, yes.
So yeah, I was deep in Bohemian Rhapsody, but I have no frame of reference for Indigo Girls. What is that? Is it a TV show?
No. It's a band from the 80s. The Indigo Girls.
I love, this is such a specific part of mine and Leigh's friendship, which is I don't really know anything.
That's not true. You know, like indie boy music. I know pop. That's where we. So just
that's where we divide.
That's where we divide.
I like pop music. I would like the record to show I like pop music.
Yes, I know, but your area of expertise is flirting with boys through indie rock playlists.
I wouldn't just say just boys, Leigh. Okay, I think it's not a gender specific experience when I talk to people about music.
Let the record show. Indigo Girls are an American folk rock music duo from Atlanta, Georgia, United States, consisting of Amy Ray and Emily Sailors. The two met in elementary school and began performing together as high school students in Decatur, Georgia, part of the Atlanta metropolitan areas.
I feel very excited about the concept of folk rock.
Oh, yes. And they have a song called Galileo, which is what kind of has brought me here.
This is a much clearer kind of link now.
They're also both lesbians.
Okay, cool. Oh, I mean, Leigh, it is truly rare for you to share music with me these days that isn't made by queer people.
I have to admit, dear listener, I am very much in a listening frame of mind where my whole Spotify rap this year, I think, is going to be lesbians. And I'm thrilled.
I'm proud of you. That's,
it's huge.
It's huge. It's huge for you.
Just Renee rap really serving me on a platter what I needed. Brandy, of course. But enough about my music taste. Let's get into the West Wing.
Yeah, let's stop talking about ourselves. People don't come here for that. They come here for us to be like, wow, CJ's being crazy. What a hot take.
Now,
episode recap.
The previously on got me excited because I was like, wow, we're getting both Laurie and Mallory. I thought maybe we'd bid goodbye to them both forever.
I thought they might both be in Mandyland, but it would appear that they are alive and well.
Yes.
I got excited because I thought both of them were going to be in the episode. We actually only meet Mallory in the episode, but also I just really appreciate that the entirety of the previously on is given over to Sam's situationships. He is not at any point in a relationship with either of these women.
No, he's having a complete crisis for this entire episode over a woman he went on one date with.
I see him for that. And actually, I know it's bad. I know it makes me a bad person, but it makes me love him more.
I don't know whether we've at this point already lost Laurie to being House's ex-wife.
Potentially, though. I feel like House might be a few years from now. Okay, we begin this episode, Leigh, in the corridors of the West Wing, where Jed has CJ hostage and is behaving like he's on that pain medication again.
Again, I really noticed the height situation happening between these two. Jed looks about 5 foot nothing, stood walking alongside CJ, which I love for a POTUS. Like just a short king as a POTUS. I think I would trust a shorter president. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, agreed. Weirdly, I agree with you. But then you get someone with like statesman-like height like Obama, and I'm like, I trust you. But that's more just about him as a shit entity, really, than anything else.
For those who might be interested, the shortest ever president of the United States was James Madison at 5'4".
Good for him.
Good for him. I guess, nutrition then wasn't what it is today.
I mean, I was watching an episode of a British TV series called QI, and they were talking about George Washington's teeth, and that he had several animal teeth put into his mouth where he had lost teeth. And also, obviously, as we know, the teeth of enslaved people, which is not a great look.
It's tough. It's tough.
It's tough. But enough about why am I behaving like Jed Bartlet on pain medication? Back to the story at hand. So they're doing a walk and talk through the corridors of the West Wing. Very fun, lovely, like high energy, high tempo way to start the episode. But Jed is talking about space and is really going for it. It reminded me of how folks in my generation felt when we heard Yellow's submarine. We really did all want to live on a yellow submarine.
I was simply floored by this.
What a phrase. I feel I must just move on, Leigh, because I can't linger there.
In a way, it was quite emotionally moving.
Yeah.
To be like, oh, you were like a flower power child of the 60s, but unfortunately you lost innocence and you had to leave that behind to become the man we see before us today. But moving swiftly on. And
then with regards to space, he says, your imagination, like a child, will explode with unrestrained possibilities for adventure.
Yeah.
Looks like we're going to Mars, Leigh, and Jed is stoked.
Yeah, not to be like a 1990s self-help book about it for women and dating. We're not about the gender binary on this podcast.
No.
But what I will say is that what could not be clearer throughout this episode, and what I believe to be true, is that the biggest difference between those who identify as men and those who identify as women, those who choose to place themselves on the gender binary, if you will, is that men fucking love space. They're obsessed with space, and women don't get it.
I can't tell you, and I think we've touched on this previously before when we were talking about the episode where Toby's brother and the newts, whether or not the shuttle was going to land. I couldn't care less about space.
No.
Now, some excellent points are made in this episode, some by Sam Seaborn, about like the fact that like actually the science behind getting to space has created huge steps forward in science that we use on Earth.
Yeah.
No shade on that. I've got a lot of respect for the folks at NASA. They're doing a great job. Female astronauts are hot. But I just feel like I don't want to sit and listen to a man tell me about how exciting it is that we're going to Mars. I don't want to go to Mars. I just want to be able to live my life here without trouble.
Not that you would have any kind of past trauma with having that very specific conversation with any men.
No, I couldn't possibly comment about a huge argument that I may or may not have had with my ex where he was like, if people were going to go and live on the moon, like that would be my dream to live on the moon. And I was like, well, you're fucking wrong. That's stupid.
You'll be going alone.
Yeah, you'll be going alone. I'm not going to be going with you.
Yeah.
It's over.
if the Earth is going down, I will be the captain and I will be going down with this ship, in the words of Dido. I'm
fully Titanicing it. Like, I'm going to stand in there till like the windows smash and water drowns me.
Yeah, at the point that we're all moving to a new planet, I'm sorry, I'm doing an elegant swan dive into the Thames and leaving it all behind.
I'm gonna old person it on the Titanic, just like lay on my bed and just let
the water take you.
Wow, we really need to move on.
I'm so sorry. We've both come into today with a very frenetic energy. We're literally in the first minute of the show.
Okay. So we're walking and talking with CJ and Jed to the classroom where it's been set up. Basically, it's going to be a televised event with the viewers being American school children, and a panel which is being hosted by the president and a number of scientists and people from NASA. Jed's opening kind of gambit on this recording has been written by Sam Seaborn's equivalent at NASA. Cue Sam Seaborn throwing incredible shade at this young man. Do you mind if I just give it a little polish? No, it's great, but do you mind if I change it? To which this man says, well, we're both writers. And Sam says, I suppose if we broaden the definition to those who can spell. Oh my God. Sam, put your claws away. Outrageous.
So catty.
So catty. CJ is struggling with Jed because obviously, as we know, he loves to learn things and tell people about them. And she's like, look, when you're hosting this panel and you're answering questions, you can't answer all of them. The people here have been like brought in to be able to answer these questions. So like, please. Leigh, would you like to comment on what CJ's wearing?
Yes. So CJ is wearing like a cream suit dress with a matching long line blazer. And it was giving me absolute life.
She's wearing like a really simple, quite short, like almost choker style gold and pearl necklace. And then she's gone for like a clear rimmed glass. Like
which normally I would despise.
It's not frameless though. It's like clear rimmed, which I actually do enjoy. She looks great for the era.
She's done really well.
Great.
She's done really well.
Yeah. So CJ's basically like, no one likes a know-it-all. And the president's like, but people want a president who appears smart. And I feel like...
Unfortunately, I fear that is simply not the case.
Let's move on. So Jed decides to practice the like opening speech that has been written by Scott Tate of NASA. And just is like, this is shit. Like grammatically, this is incorrect. And I hate you, Scott. You should feel terrible about yourself. And then it's like, Sam, take it away.
And then Sam dictates a new speech for him like he's Hamilton rapping for the first time to all the assembled boys in Hamilton.
When you wrote this in the shared doc, I like screamed out loud. I think that's the funniest. I can't. It's a perfect analogy, Leigh. Flawless.
I also do feel that every kind of red-blooded American male is always going to feel a little bit bitter that he's not an astronaut. And is this perhaps why Trump was reelected? Discuss.
It is something, isn't it, where like there are certain professions that literally are like incredibly hard to do and very, very highly skilled and often take decades of training to do. But I would say that, again, when we're saying men, I hope the listener understands what sort of men we're talking about.
When I'm saying men in this context, what I mean is bigots.
Thank you. It's that each of them will have the one job that they're like, I could have done that.
Yeah.
I could have been an astronaut.
Yeah.
Like the
just
thing
live
is,
their little Buzz Lightyear fantasy.
Yeah, like the thing is I could have managed a professional soccer team. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like I could have played in the NFL.
Yeah. This
huge.
Yeah.
Or like, you know, if my like high school friend hadn't fucked it up, like our band would be huge.
Yeah, it's very Lady Catherine de Bourgh in Pride and Prejudice, talking about playing the piano, being like, and if I had ever learned, I would be a consummate professional.
Exactly. And I just think that sometimes people say these things and I'm like, or you just hate yourself because you never tried. Moving on. We're back in the mess with Toby and Josh.
Yes.
The canteen is just getting some serious screen time of late.
We've got a new set and we're really leaning into it and enjoying it. And I love this new kind of social, semi-social space.
Toby and Josh are talking about the Galileo probe launcher. The thing we're sending to Mars. They bump into Leo. Leo's like, have you finished your lunch? Like, we have so much shit to do. At which point, Josh says, Leo, ask me how long a Martian day is. And Leo responds, no, I don't think I will.
I just love that Leo will just at no point give Josh an inch. And I think it's really important.
It's key, really, to the success of the Bartlet administration. Toby is being given a storyline with the Citizens Advice Stamp Committee. Give me strength. I'm thrilled. He obviously immediately pulls Josh into this, which, again, I really rate for. And then we also get a really bizarre, I would say like C-plot surrounding the president and green beans.
Which is based on a real story with George H. Bush and broccoli. Yes, some people do say that he might have gotten a second term if he hadn't pissed off California broccoli farmers.
Which is crazy. But we'll get into that later. I wrote in the shared doc, I worry this is going to come back around and be a much larger story than we expected. I was correct. In CJ's words, when Toby says, you didn't highlight the green bean story, she says, no, I thought it better to just alert the Justice Department. So green beans are going to be big this week.
Yeah.
But the president's actually doing some work, Leigh.
Huge. It's been a few weeks. So
Charlie is telling Jed that he's basically in back-to-back meetings and phone calls. And Jed's getting grumpy about that because he wants to clock off at 6:30 and read all of his books about Galileo and space.
Yes, and I'm just going to go ahead and heavily predict here from moment one that Jed is not going to make it to the residence to read his books by 6:30.
No, because Charlie's like, unfortunately, you cancelled a meeting yesterday with the delegates from Iceland. Mm-hmm. So now you need to go and watch the Reykjavik Symphony Orchestra perform some music. Cue my fear about us representing Icelandic people.
Yeah, I was really concerned that we were going to get a kind of Icelandic accent on the level of Pierce Brosnan's in Eurovision Story of Fire saga. Luckily, that did not materialize, which I was eternally grateful for.
I actually don't think we heard a single word from an Icelandic character. So thrilled. Not me being like, this is going to be a fun romp, and then immediately it being about whaling, which is very heavy.
Huge.
Like Jed being like to Leo, I'll give you $1,000 if you don't make me go. And
which
Leo
I was immediately like, why is this me and my girlfriend debating whether she has to come to a party with me?
Leo's like, think of the whales. And Jed just says, do they vote?
Very fun. Very fun.
Because lots of zingers this week. We're then having an intelligence briefing in the Oval, which always makes me feel a bit nervous.
Yes, we also have a lovely ominous score moment underneath this scene just to let us know that we need to be concerned about the Russian oil refinery.
Because, Leigh, it's not an oil refinery, because we've seen the satellite photos.
Yeah.
It's actually a missile silo. Juicy stuff. The problem is that, like, whilst he's trying to be briefed on this, Jed just starts talking about Galileo, and in fact,
really kind of fangirling over Galileo in quite a big way.
He leans on the desk in the Oval Office and like looks at Leo and talks about like the power of Galileo as like a thinker. And Leo's like, I really do think we need to keep talking about Russia and the fact that there's potentially like a fire like at somewhere where like quite powerful weapons are being stored.
Yeah,
but I'm glad that you're talking about Galileo.
A man who's famously been dead for quite some time.
I think you'll be pleased to know, Leigh, that Donna muscles in on the stamp storyline.
And also, you know, very much, I would say, expressing a point of view that we would very much kind of ascribe ourselves to also.
Yeah, the thing is just like Donna loves to learn. And also Donna loves to be like, why? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Which comes back around in a really nice way here because essentially a particular person has been tipped to be put on a stamp. He's a politician from Puerto Rico. And I can't remember, he's a previous governor, I want to say. But he's also a Vietnam vet.
Yes.
And like generally has like this incredible CV of political work and also like an amazing military record. The perfect candidate to be put on a stamp. But Josh is like, we can't put him on because he is pro
Puerto Rican statehood.
Yes. Which apparently is too much of a hot button topic to mean that he can be put on a stamp.
Yes.
It's too political.
Yes.
And I think we're here with Donna being like, but don't you just feel like actually what he's saying makes a lot of sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Donna's made 87 index cards about this.
Very us-coded.
It's very us-coded. Josh obviously classically then refers to the stamp committee as the dork squad.
I would say be careful who you call dork squad, Josh Lyman. When you and Sam get on one about something, it's looking remarkably akin.
Just take a long, hard look in the mirror is what I'd say. Then we have a crazy moment between Donna and Josh where Donna's really excited and she's like, let's put him on a stamp. And Josh goes, let's put you on a stamp. And I don't. And
with a look that says, let's put you on a stamp because I want to lick you.
Yeah, basically.
It is the most outrageously flirtatious look I've ever seen a man give a woman. I was like,
he's giving her bedroom eyes.
100,000%. And she will be bringing this home to the house share. She is like, if this were the modern day, she'd be like on the WhatsApp group on her way out of the door of this room being like, you will not believe what he has said now.
Let's put you on a stamp. Unacceptable, Joshua
Unacceptable.
Lyman. Don't write checks you can't cash, babe. Take her on a fucking date.
Can we just do a little prediction corner? Because we've not done one for a while. We've got, 6, 7 seasons? When do you think we're actually going to see Josh and Donna get together? How long do you think we have to wait? Do we think we're like talking last season?
Yeah, on the Ross and Rachel scale of will they, won't they? Where are we landing? See, I don't think you can keep up 6 seasons of will they, won't they with nothing happening.
No.
I think one of them is going to get engaged to someone else at some point.
A classic.
Or Donna's going to be like, I've got a job somewhere. And she would never leave. She's basically got an amazing job. I don't know.
I'm going to make a bold prediction. I'm going to say we're going to have a kiss by the end of this season.
I mean, I would love that.
And then it's like a question of like, okay, we have to put it aside for the sake of the job.
I still stand by the fact that, like, I think one of the greatest things I've said on this podcast is when Josh gets the news about his dad was the night he was going to kiss Donna.
You floored me with that. That was one of your greatest moments for sure.
Thank you. I feel like I've been living in the shadow of that prediction, or like that sort of thought. Yeah.
To green beans?
Must we? I do like that we're having quite a lot of CJ and Toby time this week, which is really nice. And yes, so this is tying into the story, like the real life story of the broccoli and the Californian farmers. So basically, CJ's like, okay, finally, I get it. I'm sorry that I didn't get it originally, Toby. But yes, when the president says he doesn't like green beans, he's upsetting the state of Oregon. And they only won Oregon by a very small margin. So they're like, look, we can't like lose the farmers of Oregon. And she's like, look, I'm sorry it took me 2.5 hours to like realize what you were trying to tell me. But it doesn't make you smarter than I am. And Toby just goes, of course not. Like in like a little like whiny way. And it's so cunty. And I just like I just have nothing but respect for it. Of course not. Toby Ziegler, what are you doing?
There's an interesting little theme that's being peppered through this episode about CJ kind of needing to prove her intelligence.
Yeah, and then of course, as she's walking away from him, Toby's like shouting after her like what he got in the SATs.
It's so petty to like in your 40s still remember what you got on the SATs.
Yeah. Coming back to this NASA classroom thing that Jed's doing. Jed basically wants CJ and Sam to come to the concert with him tonight because he wants to like broaden the theme for that classroom thing. He doesn't want it to just be about Mars, like he wants them to like find like a bigger reason.
A theme.
Which cues the line from CJ, Carol, will you have someone go to my apartment and pick up my blue Armani?
Which I love. I feel like Carol will be like, I would be honored to go to your apartment and report back to my girlfriend and my cat what I find there.
Now, Leigh, if you were Carol and you were going to CJ's apartment to pick up a dress and shoes, what are you looking at in her apartment? Don't tell me you wouldn't have like a little poke around.
Photo albums, for sure. Being like, can I suss out a relationship history? I would definitely have a little nose in the closet. And
I'd say skincare. Is that a really boring thing to say?
Skincare for sure. And then I think like bedside table. All of the deepest truths about a person can be found in the bedside table.
Agreed. We do, however, in this scene, get an explanation finally about the situationship between Mallory and Sam.
Yeah. And it is so devastatingly believable and unbelievable from Sam.
So if we roll back to the photo that was taken of Sam and Laurie on the night of her graduation, when Laurie's friend like took money to like rat Laurie out as a sex worker, Sam just didn't call Mallory to explain that.
Unbelievable.
He just ghosted Mallory.
It's also like such good writing because that's so his character.
For sure. And he's like, the thing is like, you know, like I shouldn't like, I didn't like, should should I have called her? Like, I don't know if I, like, you know, we went on one date and I'm like, you should have called her, Sam.
Yeah.
It's really not that difficult.
Because it was a whole thing. It wasn't just one date. It was like a whole thing. And I love that Leo has clearly just sat on that.
Frosty.
Yeah.
But there is also news, which is that Mallory has a new man.
Ooh.
She has a new boyfriend. And I hope that he is everything Sam hates.
Yeah.
CJ coming through with the feelings that we have by saying, didn't I tell you not to get a crush on your boss's daughter?
Don't you have a vegetable crisis to fix or something?
A solid. But we're going to go to the sit room.
Yes.
Because we need to talk about this weapons silo. Mm-hmm. We both clocked the same thing, which there's another woman speaking in the sit room who isn't Nancy.
Yes,
Thrilled.
We don't know who she is or what her job is, but we love to see her there.
Amazing. We're being given some really like detailed information about this thing that's unfolding in Russia. However, Jed gets passed a note. He's sad. He passes the note to Leo. Leo looks sad. We've lost communications with Galileo, Fi.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the stamp chat has expanded in a big way.
Yeah.
Donna, I think, is just like being a wonderful like layperson voice in the kind of conversation about Puerto Rican statehood, which I didn't know a huge amount about before this most recent American presidential election, to my shame. And I also kind of feel like I agree with Donna entirely. I find it a very strange scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I think like AOC has made a really interesting point recently in that like a lot of Puerto Rican politics has been about the question of statehood for so long that like some of the politicians there currently have kind of like put their whole weight behind statehood, and maybe the statehood party has in ways become slightly kind of corrupt. And so there is like new exciting parties coming up where statehood is not actually the primary goal because they're focused on, you know, supporting the people's needs and like putting forward the people's agenda in other ways. So I think there's definitely like nuance to have with the conversation today in terms of like whether the kind of statehood party in Puerto Rico is actually like the most for the people it could possibly be. But I think everything that Donna says about how democratic or undemocratic the system as it stands is, all of that makes a huge amount of just like common sense.
It was a really interesting thing to like be the nugget of information in terms of like the stuff that we give Donna, which is often like, let's explain this concept through Donna. It's been one of my favorite ones that I've been like, oh, cool. Like I'm going to go away and read some more about that.
Yeah.
Very brief updates on Galileo from Toby. It's not looking good for the probe. And then just essentially Josh is just like, everyone's dumb but me. I'm really not enjoying his vibe this week. So let's go to the theatre.
The gown from
let's have
CJ.
Some commotion for the gown,
the
please.
Blue Armani is truly blue Armaniing.
So it's like a blue and white patterned corset.
It's almost like a China pattern on the top. And it's a gorgeous, like, off the shoulder number and just like this huge silky skirt. It's gorgeous. I love that CJ just like has this in the closet.
I know. She is, however, clinging onto the stole, the matching stole in a big way. And I just need her to put down the stole, Leigh.
The stole has a vice-like grip on both CJ and Mallory throughout this occasion.
Yeah, it's unacceptable. This is the scene as we're like getting ready to leave the West Wing, where Sam is just having a full-on breakdown about the fact that he's seeing his ex-situationship person.
He is truly Carrie Bradshawing all over the West Wing.
He monologues at Toby about like how he feels about seeing Mallory, how Mallory might feel about seeing him, what Mallory's new boyfriend might do, how he might feel about that. And Toby just stares at him and goes, that's 20 seconds of my life I'll never get back. Meanwhile, in Leo's office, Leigh
is the hottest ambassador the world has ever seen.
The Russian ambassador who has come to speak to Leo about what's happening at this missile silo is giving me full, like, Cold War sexy spy, but, like, in her later years. Margaret, meanwhile, is just, like, obviously unable to, like, be normal around a Russian person. So it's just kind of, like, dithering and, like, I'll be just outside. But I will note that Margaret is wearing an incredible, like, black, wide leg suit with this like amazing structured jacket. And she looks incredible.
I'm so upset there's not like a clearer shot of this outfit. Because I feel like I didn't get to see it in its full detail.
Yeah, I would have liked more time with it. Margaret meets Leo outside and says, I left her alone because I think I was freaking her out.
And Leo just says, wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, which is just classic Margaret being crazy, and that's why we love her.
But then we have a phenomenal moment where Nadia, the ambassador, shamelessly tries it on with Leo because she's heard that he's newly single.
She says, I was sorry to hear about your divorce. I don't think you were, Nadia. I don't think you were sorry at all. And the way she looks him up and down and she's like leant back in her seat. Sorry to hear about your divorce.
And what I will say for Leo McGarry is he's a very handsome older gentleman. Like if I were in that dating bracket, he's an absolute catch.
I would love for there to be a storyline about Leo sleeping with the Russian ambassador.
Please give it to me. Put it in my veins.
Meanwhile, in the motorcade, Jed is being very grumpy about the fact that he's going to this concert because he wants to read his books on Galileo. And Charlie's trying to convince him that it's going to be a fun night and is reading out the particular pieces of music that the orchestra are going to be playing. And Jed's like, that's rubbish. Hate that one. That's awful. This is all modern music.
He then says anything written after 1860 sucks.
At one point when Charlie's like reading out what particular pieces are being played and the fact that like there's a particular composer from Reykjavik who's composed a new piece for that night. Jed just goes, turn the car around. But we clocked it. Lee was like, I think Jed's going to be moved by the power of modern music.
Yeah.
And we both like, yeah, it's 100% a setup for like this piece of music is going to change his life. Meanwhile, Sam Seaborn is losing his mind.
With Mallory in a lovely stole.
Classically in a stole. When Mallory like sneaks up on Sam, he's like drinking a glass of champagne. And she's like, hi, Sam. He just like looks at the champagne glass in his hand and then like panics and throws it into a trash can. It's unacceptably funny. Like when they give him like physical comedy to do, Rob Lowe is really good at physical comedy.
Yeah. It's like Kenneth Branagh. Like, you know, when you look at Kenneth Branagh and you're like, he's a comedy genius. Like, I don't understand why he spent the whole of his career doing dramatic roles.
He's a clown. Let him be a clown. I don't need to see you in another drama.
I don't need to see you crying for the French again, Kenneth.
No, and like I need you to be doing like a broad body comedy.
Correct. I will say the name that Aaron Sorkin has given to Mallory's new boyfriend is so shady to athletes everywhere. He's a hockey player and his name is Richard Andrewchuk. That is Dick Andrewchuk.
Yeah, it's crazy. Also, like I love that Mallory's like, yeah, I'm dating a well-known hockey player. And also she says bluntly to Sam's face, and we're having quite a lot of sex.
Love that for you, Mallory. Love the sex positivity. You go, girl.
And I really appreciate that, seeing as the only time she really talked about sex with Sam was when she said, you aren't going to be getting any.
I believe what she said was, under no circumstances will there be sex for you at the end of the night.
So brutal. She does, however, say about the hockey player, he happens to be a terribly bright guy, which makes me think he's not.
Yeah. That did feel a touch defensive from her. It's like, yeah, hun, we can just be having fun, having lots of sex with like a sexy hockey player. We don't need to intellectually connect also.
No, he can like, maybe he's like really kind and like makes you laugh and like treats you really well. You don't have to talk to him about like philosophy. That's not what makes a relationship.
No.
I will just take us on a sidebar to talk about the small talk that Jed is giving to the Icelandic delegates. Leigh, please, could you perform this?
I took trombone lessons when I was a kid. Not much solo music written for trombone, but I wanted to play in the marching band. The thing was, my arms were too short to reach the 7th position. One afternoon during a game, I gave it all I had and ended up throwing the slide into the end zone, which is more I can say for our quarterback.
This had me in stitches, but I also do want at some point him and Ainsley to have a bonding moment over playing trombone.
Correct, yes.
The fact that hasn't yet come up.
The fact that they were the same position in the marching band is frankly hilarious. Just two nerds.
Just two nerds who like are both very detail-oriented people and very intense.
Mm-hmm.
We do get some bad news from the oil refinery, in quotations, which is the missile silo that's on fire currently in Russia. which is that they were draining liquid hydrogen from the warheads.
Not great.
Not great. And Sam's like, this is really bad and really dangerous. Like, this is genuinely like kind of like almost like NATO level sitch.
Yeah.
And Jed's like, but what about Galileo 5? Like, are we going to be able to see pictures of Mars?
Can you please just stop being obsessed with space for 5 minutes? Like, let's very much, can we deal with the earthbound problems first, please?
Yeah, like, we're not that far from the Cold War.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But back to the green beans, because we find out some juicy info, Leigh, about the green beans, which is Charlie was the leak.
Yeah.
Charlie was like, like some reporters came into the White House kitchens. They asked about what the president liked and didn't like. I said he liked steak and lobster. I said he didn't like green beans. And CJ's like, Charlie, you don't know what you've done. You can't say things like that. You're going to lose us the election. It's like, this is a serious thing. And Charlie says, education is a serious thing. Crime, jobs, national security. In 18 months, I've been to Oregon 4 times and not a single person I have met there has been stupid.
Everyone is stupid in an election year, Charlie. CJ Cregg, the year 2000.
Oh.
Moving swiftly on.
Oh, wow. Okay.
To the moment of the episode for me.
This is the greatest scene in this episode. So CJ goes outside and takes a phone call to Toby, talking about the green beans and other things. So CJ was anxious about going to the concert because she has recently interviewed people for a particular position and she has filled that position. But she's like, everyone who I interviewed is going to be at this concert.
Yeah.
And it's going to be an awkward situation of bumping into people that you've interviewed and then not given the job. And I'm with her on that one. Or never a nice feeling. However, whilst on the phone to Toby, she's like, oh my God, Tad Whitley is here. He's got me in his tractor beam.
Oh, I feel this so deeply to my core. You know, when you just like, you see someone coming at you like a car crash in slow motion and you're like, I'm not going to be able to escape.
And she just like is on the phone to Toby and she's like, okay, don't hang up because if it seems like I'm talking, Toby immediately hangs up.
And that is a prime example of Toby not being a girl's girl.
But in many ways also being a girl's girl because he's like, bitch, I think this is funny and I want you to tell me about it later. Because I think that Toby has many thoughts about Tad Whitley. Wow. What a man.
Just when I thought that Aaron Sorkin couldn't possibly write a more hateful man than any of the hateful men we've seen thus far, he gave us Tad Whitley, an ex-flame for the ages, potentially the most disgusting ex the world has ever seen.
You know when you look back on someone that you dated and you're like, oh, at the time, like, that was really frustrating or like, I was kind of upset about it. But, you know, I am so fine that didn't work out.
Yeah.
And actually, in retrospect, I was at a low ebb, perhaps, when I entered into that. This is what I'm feeling for CJ.
Yes.
CJ has absolutely no emotional connection to this man.
No.
And this man is convinced CJ is still in love with him. And I am riveted. Basically, he's like, look, CJ, you didn't give me the job. So now I should tell you that the reason why I stopped calling you, because I think maybe that's what you're upset about. And that's why you didn't give me the job. Like, no, honey. Like Tad. Also, who's called Tad? What is Tad short for? Is it like a nickname for like a longer name?
Tad is short for a number of names, including Thaddeus, Theodore, and Thomas.
I hate all of that. I think like Thaddeus is just a cool name, full name it.
Yeah.
Theodore be Theo or Teddy. Come on.
Yeah.
And then Thomas be Tom. Don't be Tad.
Yeah. When Ted is available, why be a Tad? Do you know what I mean?
So true. He then says 3 sentences, which I typed out in all capital letters because I was furious. He says to CJ, it wasn't because you were bad in bed or anything like that. He says then, I mention it because I know a lot of women who worry about that. And she's like, no, I know I'm good in bed. And then she's like, look, it was nothing personal. Like genuinely, I decided to promote from within. And he just can't take it. He's like, this is completely personal and unprofessional.
Wild.
And babe, I need him to understand that she dated him for 6 weeks, 5 years ago. The fact that he thinks she's still holding on to this is crazy.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to say it because he's never going to listen to this podcast. But in my straight era, I dated a man who was absolutely convinced, when I just told him that his behavior was unacceptable when everything ended, he was convinced that I had told him his behavior was unacceptable because I was desperately upset. And if you recall, there was a night that you and I went for a night out on the town, and he called me because I had called him out for his unacceptable behavior. He assumed I was crying in bed alone, which was not the case. And to this day, saw him at a wedding this summer, and both him and his wife blanked me, given that I've since come out as gay.
But I think in his mind, he's like, wow, I just, it's going to be awkward because Leigh's in love with me.
I was fully a lesbian that whole time. Like, that was a huge factor in why, like, that never worked out, was because that was kind of the key issue there, was that I was gay and you were a dick. But
it was crazy how he was like, wow. It makes sense how you're never going to get over me. And we were like, I think actually she's fine. We're just giving you some feedback, which we feel is quite important going forward. Should we go on to some more relationship drama with Mallory?
Yes.
So Sam is outside the theater, like on the phone to Josh, being like, oh my God, it's like so hard seeing her. Which I love.
Just two girls, just having a goss, just having a check-in. Just an emotional check-in post-exciting.
Sam's like, she's here. She snuck up from behind. You'd think women would make more noise with those big high heels, but they don't. They got this stealth thing going on, which they really ought to be.
Enter Mallory.
Literally tapping on the window of the car. And Sam's like, oh my God, she's here. And then Josh just says, what's she wearing?
For God's sake.
Christ.
I've never respected Mallory more than when she doesn't understand why we have to go to Mars.
It's a really, like, she just is us in this moment when she's like, I don't get it. And then Sam says a very Jed Bartlet-esque thing when he says, we came out of the cave and we looked over the hill and we saw fire and we crossed the ocean and we pioneered the West and we took to the sky. The history of man is hung on a timeline of exploration, and this is what's next. And she's like, okay, cool. Go to Mars then. I really don't care. She's like, I get it. Like, humans are supposed to be explorers. I am not questioning that.
I mean, when he says us, does he mean mankind or does he mean kind of like white America? Because there is a little bit of a kind of manifest destiny vibe to what he's saying.
It is very like, you expect to see like a waving American flag behind him. But the way they look at each other, there is still something between them.
Yeah.
Let's do a quick stamp check-in. Mm-hmm. Donna's lost it and is talking about moths, and Josh is choosing to ignore her.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Nadia, our Russian ambassador. Jed has entered the chat. He comes through the door and just goes, your paranoia was a lot sexier back when you guys were communists, Nadia.
And for one insane moment, I thought Nadia, Jed, and Leo were about to have a threesome. The sexual tension between all three of them is crazy.
Also, like, I do kind of feel like, Leo was like cracking on with Nadia, and then Jed's come in as a married man and it's like really giving it large. And I'm like, come on, like, stop cop blocking Leo with Nadia. She's then like leant on her chair, like looking back at him as Jed leaves the room, because she's like, look, there's no problem. Like, we want everything to be on our terms. And Jed's like, no, like, NATO's getting involved. We're going to sort this out. You guys are having a laugh. He says, I really don't know from where you guys get the nerve. And Nadia responds with, from a long, hard winter, Mr. President.
Crazy.
Which I think is one of the craziest lines I've ever heard. And in my head, the music from the animated film Anastasia starts playing.
To be fair, many an empire has been broken by underestimating a Russian winter. So, like, I do see what she's saying,
I know. I just feel like she has more to say than from a long, hard winter. She is an ambassador.
Yeah.
But hey, I think 100% she was a spy in her younger years.
Yeah.
And I would love to see more from Nadia. But let's close out with the team in the Oval. Yeah. So we're all back from the theatre. We've all come together. Jed, Leo, Toby, Josh, Sam, CJ. And we find news that Galileo is in safe mode. So maybe we might hear from it again. Maybe not all is lost. The stamp is going to be made. And Jed is allowed to admit that he doesn't like green beans. At which point everyone gets dismissed but CJ. And then they walk out onto the terrace, Leigh. and Jed lights up a cheeky little cig.
Which is one of my favorite ththings about him. Smoking kills kids, but also we love a fatal flaw.
Just like him, like literally the second he opens the door from the Oval Office, just like on the doorstep, just like lighting up his cigarette, like he needs it.
Yeah.
Iconic behavior. He then has a really lovely conversation with CJ where he talks about being moved, as we expected, by the new composer's music. The quote being, "I really didn't think I could be surprised by music anymore." I think Jed would be surprised by the music being made in 2024.
I would love to see Jed and Obama have a debate about the power of modern music.
Yeah, I would tune into that.
Where Obama just like really impassioned sits down and is like, "No, but lose yourself."
Yeah. People like this, Jed. Okay. Now, what I'm saying is, I got up on the stage and I started to speak in a spoken word style the lyrics of Lose Yourself by Eminem. So basically, CJ's like, look, I think I found what the broader theme is of the classroom thing. And even though we've lost contact with Galileo 5, I think you should still do it because I think it's about kids being able to put their hand up and going up to the blackboard and asking questions and not being stupid for not knowing the answers.
Yeah.
And that really connected with me and actually emotionally destroyed me in many ways. And Jed like monologues into the sky, which is crazy. And then CJ's like, good night, and heads inside. And the episode ends, Leigh, with Jed Bartlet looking to the heavens, to space, and just whispering, talk to us.
This absolutely sent me. I was unfortunately unable to handle that in any way. I can't take it seriously. It's a step too far.
Like he's heartbroken, like almost he could be on the verge of tears, just like dragging on his cigarette, staring up at the stars. Talk to us.
It really is kind of the energy of Kenneth Branagh singles hearing for the French in Dunkirk.
I mean, if any other actor other than Martin Sheen has no right to pull off that line. And it's because Martin Sheen has such gravitas.
Yes, yes.
And that's all I've got, Leigh. That's the end of the episode recap. What a wild ride it was.
Oh, also, but very quickly before we go, I wanted to mention that Alison Janney won an Emmy for Outstanding Supporting Actress. And this was one of the 2 episodes that was submitted for consideration.
That tracks.
Yeah.
What was the other one?
Season 2, episode 2, In the Shadow of the Gunman, part 2.
That's the necklace storyline.
Yes. Stockard Channing was also nominated, but Alison won the day.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
She right
has more to do.
Yeah. To the quick fires?
Let's go, girls.
Best fashion.
It has to be the blue Armani, doesn't it?
I mean, I don't think anything comes close. I do think that the cream suit dress and long line blazer does need a mention.
Yes, I would also like to have an honourable mention for Ambassador Nadia's like high neck suit.
Yeah. She looked great. Donna was wearing a lovely turtleneck in another pale blue. And obviously, we long to have had more time with Margaret's black suit.
Yeah.
What could a British or Irish politician never get away with?
Talking to the sky, even in private.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I literally don't think I need to say any more on the subject. Talk to us. Dead. How long until our big ticket items, guns, abortion, free speech, religion come up? I mean, we had a kind of Cold War moment, sexy former spy, relationships with Russia.
And it felt like a more respectful Cold War moment than the Ukrainian ambassador.
Than we'd had with Vasily, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. What was your best writerly moment, Leigh?
Anything written after 1860 sucks.
That's a slam dunk. For me, it had to be Leo, ask me how long a Martian day is. No, I don't think I will. Perfect for me. Man, I feel like a man.
Let's put him on a stamp. Let's put you on a stamp.
Yeah, that's wild. I think I'd like to go for, well, we're both writers. I suppose if we broaden the definition to those who can spell. Just crazy from Sam Seaborn. Or it wasn't because you were bad in bed or anything like that. I mention it because I know a lot of women who worry about that. This is completely personal and unprofessional. Fuck
Horrifying.
you, Tad. Fuck you. And what was the moment that made you proudest to be an American, Leigh?
It's about going to the blackboard and raising your hand. CJ Cregg, 2000.
Yeah.
But I would like to give an honourable mention as the moment that make me second proudest to be an American, which also came from CJ Cregg, which is, I am great in bed. I know that.
She also says that to the president in the Oval Office.
Which I can do nothing but support.
Exactly. That's me done, Leigh. I would love to know what we're learning this week.
We are going to look at the space race, both historical and present day.
Stunning.
So obviously, as we kind of see in this episode, I think quite interestingly that they've kind of tied a kind of Cold War moment with a kind of Mars exploration moment. Obviously, the space race historically was very much a kind of Cold War issue because we were in an arms race in the 1950s. I say we. That was obviously very much between the two big superpowers of the day, being the Soviet Union and the United States.
We were still rationing bread at that point.
Yeah, Britain was taking a moment. Britain
was building the NHS.
Yeah, for sure. Kind of children playing in rubble was very much the vibe in Britain at this point. But yes, so there's a growing threat of nuclear weapons, kind of wide-ranging espionage, counter-espionage, the war in Korea, clashes of words and ideas kind of carried out in the media. But also, what really threw the Americans for a loop was that on October 4th, 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik.
Okay. I know nothing about Sputnik apart from the fact that Ross Geller dresses as Sputnik in Friends.
Yes. So Sputnik was, in fact, the world's first artificial satellite and the first man-made object to be placed into the Earth's orbit.
That's very cool.
Yeah. Now, the United States did not see this coming. Space was at this time very much seen as like the next frontier and the logical extension of America's grand tradition of exploration. Although, as we discussed in our Thanksgiving episode, not all frontiers are good.
Nope.
And basically they were like, okay, we're already behind. We can't lose too much ground to the Soviets. Enter Project A119. This is legitimately insane. I'm just gonna caveat that this is completely mental. The US is like, we need to reclaim the narrative. Like, we need to show the world that the communists don't have the upper hand. And there's also quite a big fear amongst the American public after Sputnik that, you know, it would be followed by like Soviet nuclear missiles raining down on US soil. You know, people were like panicked about this stuff. So America was like, okay, we need to do something big, like nuking the moon.
What?
Now, this had no practical purpose. There was no discernible national security goals. The sole design of the whole thing was just to kind of put on a big show and show that the US could do something kind of spectacular. So yeah, basically after World War II, there's this scientist called Dr. Leonard Reifel of the Armor Research Foundation. And him and his team basically are like pushing physics to its limit, working on projects that study like global environmental effects of nuclear explosions. And sometime around May 1958, the US Air Force asks his team to investigate the visibility, like what would be able to be seen from Earth, and the effects of a hypothetical nuclear explosion on the moon. The Air Force being like, we want to surprise the Soviets and the world and be like, look what America can do. Like, this is just all so male. It's unbelievable. Now, two other scientists get involved. Gerard, either Kuiper or Cooper, I'm not sure how to say, I'm so sorry, Gerard's surname, who was an expert on planetary physics. And then also a young graduate from the University of Chicago, Carl Sagan, who actually went on to have quite a big TV career as the science guy. And Sagan's job was basically to do the maths. So to work out what kind of a dust cloud would be made from a nuclear explosion on the moon, to therefore establish like how much would be able to be seen from Earth, and therefore what a big show the US would be able to put on by doing this. Now, one could say, why on earth would the scientists agree to work on such an insane...
Yeah, a valid question that I have.
But of course, we must remember, post McCarthy, we are in the kind of intensely like commie scare vibes. And Robert Oppenheimer, famously, as the world came to see in the year of the Barbie movie, was blacklisted for renouncing his own work when he opposed the hydrogen bomb. So scientists very much were kind of wanting and needing to show their patriotism, I suppose. And also Carl Sagan, who ended up dedicating his life to kind of look for evidence of life in other planets, felt it would be a great way to kind of try and identify microbes and organic molecules that might be on the moon. Now, Rifle did later in life insist that the US had the capability to hit a target on the moon with an accuracy of within 2 miles, but they ultimately ended up not doing it.
Shocker.
Because of the way that the moon's atmosphere is, it's essentially a vacuum, so there wouldn't be like a big plume of an explosion or like sound or shockwave. It would just basically be a lot of dust. Now, whether that was the reason why the program was scrapped, the reason is still unclear. Some of it is still classified, but there was like a potential, obviously, that the Air Force was concerned about potential danger to people on Earth if the mission catastrophically failed, as so many attempts at spaceflight did in the 50s. Also, they were obviously concerned about contaminating the moon with radioactive material. So I think we can all be grateful that they kind of called time on that insane and stupid plan.
Yeah.
With no discernible actual goal. And instead, in 1958, the US launched its own satellite in the image of Sputnik, Explorer 1. And the same year, Eisenhower signed the public order creating NASA, which is the National Aeronautics and Space Administration.
A much better use of time, I think.
Yes. 1959, the Soviets launched Luna 2, which was the first space probe to actually hit the moon. And again, they beat the Americans to the punch when in 1961, they sent the Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin, who was the first person to orbit the Earth. And it wasn't until, so that happened in April, it wasn't until May that Alan Shepard became the first American in space. Now, JFK is like, we need to do something show-stopping. So he announces that America is going to land a man on the moon by the end of the decade.
Okay.
And between 1961 and 1964, NASA's budget was increased almost 500%.
Whoa.
Yeah. And by the end of 1962, Project Apollo is in place, which would eventually employ 34,000 people at NASA and 375 people who were contracted in under industrial or universities. There was a huge setback in 1967 when 3 aeronauts were killed when a spacecraft caught fire in a launch simulation.
Wow.
But then, of course, more than 1 million people gathered along Florida's Space Coast to watch Apollo 11 on July 16th, 1969. The astronauts, of course, being Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. And 4 days later, on July 20th, Armstrong became the first man to walk on the moon's surface, which he famously called one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
What a moment to have like a really good phrase come to you.
Yeah, huge. I mean, he had 4 days on his way there to kind of think about it.
Yeah, to workshop a few things, I reckon.
Yeah. And of course, it was a huge moment. There was a frenzy of interest because there was this new medium of television that was able to kind of show the world what was happening. Now, there is some really interesting invisible work that went into this that is obviously not celebrated to the extent that the actual astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, are celebrated, largely done by women, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
The spacesuits that the astronauts wore were made by a company called Playtex, which gave America the Cross Your Heart bra in the 1960s.
Incredible news.
And basically, Playtex sold itself for the contract to NASA by saying that as a company, they were very familiar with garments that had to be both form-fitting and flexible.
Not wrong.
And it turned out to be an inspired choice because some of the layers of fabric in the suits were actually adapted directly from Playtex's bras and girdles.
I'm so glad I never lived in an era where girdles were a thing.
I think we can all be grateful for that for sure. And the assembling the spacesuits was considered such delicate, critical work that it was done by hand. Each layer was sewn by a woman who was brought over from Playtex's industrial division.
Wow. Hand sewn. Christ.
Hand sewn, the spacesuits. Insane. Every stitch had to be absolutely perfect in order for the spacesuits to protect the astronauts.
That's a really fun fact.
Playtex is now an independent company called ILC Dover, which 50 years later still makes all of NASA's spacesuits. I imagine no longer by hand, but...
Yeah, but let's hope.
There was also a heat shield around the shuttle itself that was obviously critical to stop the shuttle from overheating and exploding. But the only thing that they could find to like actually heat protect the shuttle was this honeycomb framework, which needed to be filled with like a heat shield resin. And the only way to do that in the 1960s was by hand. And so, again, mostly women had this role called gunners, where they used modified caulk guns to fill each cell with resin.
Whoa.
It was like critical and so delicate that each gunner had to be trained for 2 weeks before being allowed to work on the heat shield.
Wow.
Also, the computer in Apollo 11, I think this is crazy, used a kind of memory called core rope memory, which also had to be made by hand. So each wire representing a 1 or a 0 in the computer program in Apollo 11 had to be positioned with absolute precision by a person using a needle and a wire instead of thread. So the wire was threaded through a ring-shaped magnet was a 1, and a wire threaded to the outside of that magnet was a 0. So that was hand woven by women who were mainly textile workers working in a factory in Waltham, Massachusetts.
Wow.
They literally threaded the code, Fiona.
I feel like you would have been at that job being like, we're doing what? To make a what?
Yeah. And the whole Apollo 11 guidance computer only contained 73 kilobytes of memory, which is less found in a typical microwave today.
That is insane, isn't it? Like again, it just reinforces the fact that I don't like thinking about space that much because it scares me. But I'm like, the faith that you had to have as an astronaut getting into essentially a like jet-propelled tin can sewn together made of resin.
No.
I'll stay on Earth, thank you very much.
It's a no from me. But also, they weren't just like weaving the memory for the computer. They were literally like weaving the programming instructions, like the directions to get to the moon. Because the computer's memory was fixed. Because like most computers at this time in like 1960 whatever were like a full room. You know. Wild. But just I'd like to kind of counterpoint this like hero's journey for the space race. I think it is also really important to highlight that the Apollo 11 liftoff was also like quite heavily protested. A group of 500 mostly African-American protesters led by civil rights leader Reverend Ralph Abernathy, who was one of Reverend Martin Luther King's closest aides before his assassination, arrived outside the gates of the Kennedy Space Center, and they brought with them 2 mules and a wooden wagon to contrast, you know, kind of the amount of money that was being put into the space race in comparison to the amount of money that was being put into issues faced by American citizens on land in the 1960s. As today, you know, there was a huge number of children living in poverty. And there's a photograph of one of their protest signs that says, $12 a day to feed an astronaut. We could feed a child for 8.
Yeah.
And it was a peaceful protest, and somebody from NASA came out to speak to them. Thomas Paine, the administrator who came out to speak to Ralph Abernathy, is quoted as saying, if we could solve the problems of poverty in the United States by not pushing the button to launch men into the moon tomorrow, then we would push that button. And he added that he hoped that Abernathy would hitch his wagons to our rocket, using the space program as a spur to the nation to tackle problems boldly in other areas, and using NASA's space success as a yardstick by which progress in other areas should be measured. They shook hands, and Payne invited the protesters to sit in a VIP viewing area to watch the moonshot, and then Reverend Abernathy led a prayer for the safety of the astronauts. So an entirely peaceful protest, but I think it's really important to highlight that like the space race from a US perspective at this point wasn't uncontroversial in terms of the amount of resources that were going towards it. Now, obviously, by landing a man on the moon, the United States effectively won the space race. I think people hoped that it would kind of carry on from there and get people to Mars much more quickly. But
it's a lot further away.
It's a lot further away. Political and public support kind of waned for the space race as the nation's focus shifted to the Vietnam War. And protests led to an increased focus on kind of civil rights, women's rights, the environment. And by 1970, NASA officials had scrubbed the final 3 moon landings, and President Richard Nixon rejected a new NASA recommendation to build a space station on the moon that could be used as a base for exploration to Mars. And Nixon is quoted as saying, "We must build on the success of the past, always reaching out for new achievements, but we must also recognize that many critical problems here on this planet make high priority demands on our attention and our resources."
I think it's a good call. I think it's a good call, you know.
Which brings us to 2024, as much as we kind of hate to be here. Yes, Oliver Holmes of The Guardian has written an article recently where he described spaceflight as having a renaissance moment. Greg Sadlier, a space economist and co-founder of No Space Consultancy, is quoted as saying, "To say we are in a new era, that's absolutely fair. We're in the era of competition, or the commercial era. The barriers to entry are lower, the costs have fallen, which has opened the doors to a much larger pool of nations. It's the democratization of space."
Cool.
So today, more than 70 countries have space programs, whereas, you know, obviously in the 60s, it was really only the US and the Soviet Union that were in any way big players. We, of course, as I'm sure Steve Carell would want us to know, the US Space Force was established in 2019 as the 6th military service branch. And in 2021, China and Russia announced joint plans to build a shared research station on the surface of the moon. The International Lunar Research Station is open to any interested international parties.
Cool.
Although, you know, it must be said that obviously the US not being an ally to either of those countries necessarily, they might not be hugely welcome.
I don't want to go.
No. No.
I do feel like there's a reasonable amount from the news you can gather. There's like a sense of camaraderie when it comes to space travel, that like some political relationships are kind of put to the side slightly because it's just like scientists being friends and being excited about space.
Well,
Am I wrong?
We say that, but everyone I think is a bit panicked. Because in June 2024, images were beamed back to Earth of a Chinese flag on the moon.
Oh, yeah.
And it was China's 4th landing on the moon and the first ever mission to return samples from the moon's far side.
The dark side of the moon, famously. So everyone got a bit tetchy about that.
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously America's like, the moon is for everyone, but also we only ever really want an American flag up there.
That's classic America in my mind. Like, honestly, it's like not a big deal at all. Like, actually, I think it's actually like a really nice thing for like the moon to be like a community space. But like if there was to be a flag, it would make sense that it would be us.
It's giving kind of like the current space race is kind of giving like stressful group project between people who don't get on.
Yes.
And what's also stressful is that now it's not just countries that are doing moon missions, it's also like private companies.
Yeah.
In February this year, a US firm, Intuitive Machines, became the first private company to put a lander on the moon, and loads more are set to follow, including, obviously, love of our life, Elon Musk's situation.
I don't wish to talk about him.
No.
Because I'll say something and I shouldn't.
Yeah, but we'll just leave that there. Justin Holcomb, a geologist at the University of Kansas, said our relationship with the moon is going to fundamentally change very soon because space exploration is now outpacing our international laws.
Wow, that's a fascinating take. Also, like, I feel like really wild about like going into therapy and like a therapist being like, so how's your week been? And me being like, I really feel like my relationship with the moon is due to change.
Yeah, it's crazy. Obviously, one of our good friends is just like very emotionally and spiritually connected to the moon. And I don't want her to be panicked about people claiming the moon as their own.
I know. The moon truly is for everyone.
Yeah. A UN agreement from 1967 says no nation can own the moon. The Outer Space Treaty, it's called, says that it belongs to everyone and that any exploration has to be carried out to the benefit of all humankind and to the interests of all nations. Although, obviously, what is to the benefit of all humankind and the interests of all nations is kind of up for debate.
That's true, isn't it? It's quite broad language.
And unfortunately, the moon contains minerals like iron and titanium and helium that make having access to the moon's resources, estimates value from like billions to quadrillions in terms of like the worth of the moon and what's there.
I don't want to cost her up like she's some sort of prized turkey.
I know, she's worth more than that.
She moves the seas. Just leave her be. I swear, it's all coming back around how much I hate. Just leave it all alone. We've made our bed now.
Yeah.
The world is how it's going to be, all right?
Yeah.
We're going down. The ship's going down. Stop bringing the moon into this.
A 1979 international treaty declared that no state or organization can claim to own the resources on the moon, but only 17 countries signed it.
Oh.
And this does not include any of the nations who've actually been to the moon, including the US.
So the US didn't sign it?
No.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, the head of NASA, Bill Nelson, said that the US and China are in effect in a race to return to the moon. Professor Kazuto Suzuki of the Graduate School of Public Policy at the University of Tokyo agrees that China and the US are in a race, but not to set feet on the moon like in the Cold War, rather to find and control the moon's resources.
Right, to, steal all of the shit she's got. Wow.
Yeah.
This is making me very upset.
Yeah, it is kind of mildly, not even mildly, it is just kind of horrifying.
Like, have we not learned anything?
Yeah, like just like, I would love us to just like not mess with stuff,
Yeah.
However, Professor Suzuki feels that the US isn't actually as interested in the moon. They're more focused on Mars. Now, why would we be focused on Mars? Number one, it is the most like Earth of any of the other planets. Other than the Earth, it is the planet most likely to have developed indigenous life. It will probably be the first extraterrestrial planet to be visited by humans.
I mean, that would be very cool for the people doing that. But what I don't want is for men to talk to me about it.
Yeah. But as of right now, NASA has contracted SpaceX to land astronauts, including the first woman on the moon this decade.
I think it's crazy there's not been a woman on the moon.
It is wild. And like the moon is famously kind of our thing, you know?
Yeah. Like literally she's connected to us.
I feel her in my waters, quite literally.
Quite literally. There's been loads of female astronauts have been to space.
Yes.
But
yes.
no female astronaut has landed and walked upon the moon.
Yes.
They just won't let us do anything, will they? I think what we've uncovered today is that like that space is a real hot topic for me. There's a lot of rage for me to work through. But I did thoroughly enjoy that session.
In conclusion, I would like to stay on the Earth's surface. I would like, frankly, I would like everyone to stay away from the moon, if at all possible. I mean everyone. I'm not taking sides here. I mean all people. I think also speaking from an Irish perspective, which like, lol at us ever having a space program. Please, everyone, just stay at home.
I feel that we should all take a leaf out of Jed's book and just stand and look into the night. Talk to us. That's as far as I'd like to go. You know?
Yeah.
A longing gaze up to the skies is fine by me. Great, yeah. Well, I'm going to go and worry about the moon.
Yeah, I think we all should. Let's all say a prayer for the moon, send good vibes to the moon.
And then next week, should we just meet up and do this again?
Let's do it.
Okay, amazing. In the meantime, if any of you good folks want to be in touch,
you can email us, queergalswatch@gmail.com. You can check out our socials, Queer Gals Watch, wherever you get your socials. And we're also, if you'd care to take a gander, we're also on good old Patreon, where we have a fun members chat. It's great. Everyone there is really fun and frisky and free.
Swing on by and take a little look. Until then, Leigh, let's just channel CJ in the blue Armani.
Until then, let's just channel the gall and gumption of
Tad.
Yeah.
Vile.
Love you, bye.
Love you, bye.